Welcome. In this session we would understand what are definitions. Now this appears to be a very simple topic, but usually around 1 to 2 questions are asked every time in paper 1 based on this topic. So in this session we would understand what is definition, the types of definition and the basic things you need to know about it for the examination point of view. Now this is a topic that is usually a part of logic. We usually don't think about such common terms in our daily life, but from a logical perspective, or I could say from a philosophical perspective, we need to understand this topic in depth. Now what does definition means per se? I can say it is something that is trying to make things more clear. So if I say what is this pen, or I want to define this pen, I can say this is an object by the help of which I can write. Okay, so that is one definition that I can propound. Similarly, there can be different types of definitions that I can propound. For a point of view of writer, this would be much more than a pen. Okay, so you can understand definition in various ways. We'll see further how we go. So when we try to understand the definition, you have two components of a definition, I could say. It is definitum and definin. So the term which we are trying to explain, for example here it was pen, that would be definitum, and what we are trying to explain about it, the group of words that explain that single word, would be definin. So here bachelor means an unmarried man, that would be a definin and this would be a definitum. So that helps you to give meaning to the word and make the thing more clear. So I can say broadly it is a kind of integration of a concept to reach to a specific concept. Now there can be various types in which I can explain something. We'll start with the very simple ones first. The first is formal versus extended. So if I want to define water, a formal definition of water could say water is a liquid that consists of 2 atoms of hydrogen and 1 atom of oxygen. So I can say H2O, and that is a very formal definition or a very direct definition of water. But when I talk about extended definition of water, what I can include is, I can say what I said in the formal definition. Along with it, I am trying to explain the physical or the chemical properties and some basic characteristics. So I can say it's colorless, tasteless or odorless, it boils at certain degree and it freezes at certain degree. So that is what I am trying to incorporate into a extended definition. So this was a very formal or a very simple classification, I could say, to explain or understand what is definition. Now let's move on to something bit comprehensive. So you have intentional versus extensional. Now when I say intentional versus extensional, what does it mean? Intentional means I am trying to explain the features of something. So for example, I have a pen here. So what I am trying to do is, I am just trying to explain the feature of this pen, that this is an object which is used to write. So that is a kind of intentional definition, or a definition which incorporates its features. So this definition would lead to connotative demarcation of something. However, an extensional definition is something when I am trying to extend the definition to a much broader perspective. So for example, I can say this pen is used by mostly by the students. Okay, so what I am trying to do is, I am trying to extend this definition further. So for example, if I say any object which revolves around a star in an elliptical path is a planet. Now I have defined the definition, or I have defined what is planet. Now what I am trying to do in the next sentence, I am trying to say Venus is a planet. Now as an extension of this definition, I can say Venus is moving in an elliptical orbit around a star which is Sun. So what I am trying to do here is, I am trying to extend my definition further. So if I am trying to extend my definition outside its ambit, it would be extensional, and this process is usually denotative. So if you are clear with what is intentional and what is extensional, you can understand what is connotative and what is denotative. So connotative would be something which is intentional in nature. However, denotative would be something which is extensional in nature. So in simple terms, intentional, I can say it is a set of features which is shared by everything where I am trying to apply it. However, extensional is something which is a collection of individuals which can be correctly applied to the group. So that is extensional, and extensional are usually denotative. Now we will understand the types of denotative and types of connotative explanations or definitions. So when I say, before that we will try to understand the basic rules for denotative definitions because connotative definition, because for denotative definition we are extending it, so we are describing it more, so it can be beyond the ambit of the connotative definition. So connotative definition is something what it really means, or we are trying to explain its features. So there are 5 rules that must be followed to understand it. First is, we must focus on the essential feature. So the essential feature of this pen here is to write. So when we are trying to give a definition of pen, you must not forget the essential feature. Then there should be no circularity. No circularity means it's meant for just for a purpose of confusing. For example, if I say what is the definition of a cordless phone, if I say a phone without a cord is known as a cordless phone, that is a kind of circular definition. You are just picking up the phrases and the words from the word itself and trying to explain the definition based on that, and that is not considered as a good connotative definition. Now these rules were given by Copy and Cohen, and they believe that these 5 rules are the best rules to define a good definition. Then you need to capture the correct extension. You need to capture what it is meant for. You should not incorporate unnecessary stuff into the concept. So that is another important thing. Then is avoiding figurative language. For example, if I meet someone and I greet them and I ask them, I hope you are doing well, rather than that I say, I believe you are in the pink of the health. That means I am using a kind of figurative language here, which is usually not considered a part of good definition. So don't use figurative language when you are talking about the basic connotative definition. And finally, be affirmative. Negative statement usually does not lead to good definition. An example would be, if I try to explain who is an honest person, I can say a person who rarely speaks lie would be an honest person. Now this won't be a good definition because I am trying to incorporate into a negative meaning, that is a person who rarely speak lie. So that's a kind of negative thing that I am trying to incorporate into the definition, and hence it won't be a part of good definition. So these are certain rules that were propounded by Copy and Cohen, and they are considered as the basis for formation of intentional definition or the connotative definition. Now let's move and understand what are the types of denotative and connotative definitions. So when I talk about the extensional definitions, I can define extensional definition into 3 types. The one is when I am trying to give example about something. So when I am trying to explain about pen, I am trying to give an example of a specific pen, say Parker. So what you do here is you try to substitute it by means of example. The next is ostensive and quasi-ostensive. Now these are something you need to think about more when you are trying to understand. There are certain things like values, beliefs, which you cannot define into statements. Similarly, if I want you to explain or to define certain colors, say if I want you to define green color of this marker, how would you define it? The only way I can ask a child to understand what is a green color is by observing this color and asking him, by pointing it out and asking him that this is a green color. So that definition is a kind of extensional definition when you are merely pointing out the object to understand, to help understand the concept or the definition of that thing. So that is what is ostensive. Now what is quasi-ostensive? Quasi-ostensive means Here I am trying to not only point out, but I am also trying to describe it. For example, if I am trying to explain yellow color, I can say yellow color as in sun, or yellow color as in lemon, or something like that. So what I am trying to do is, I am trying to mention the color along with something that describes or substitutes that color or helps you understand the meaning of that color. So that is what is quasi-ostensive. So quasi-ostensive is again a type of extensional definition when I am extending it and I cannot do it merely in words. So what I am doing is, I am pointing it out and I am describing it by means of some substitutions that I have. So that is what is quasi-ostensive. So these are the three types of extensional definition. So we talked about definition, we talked about the two things, the extensional and the intentional. And under extensional you have the ostensive, you have the quasi-ostensive, and you have the definition by example. Now let's move on to intentional. Intentional, I can have two categories to understand it. So one, I have the 4 criteria that I am discussing here, and then the 5 types that we would be understanding further. So first is etymological definition. What does that mean? If I say geography, rather than explaining what geography means, I break down the word into parts and I explain the meaning of words. For example, geography is made up of 2 words, geo plus graphis, and this geo means earth and graphis means to describe. So hence I can say geography is a subject which describes earth. So what I am trying to do is, I am trying to break down the existing word. For example, similarly happens with psychology or something else. So what I am doing is, I am breaking down the word into parts and I am trying to explain the meaning of each Latin word, usually Latin, and then I am trying to say this is the meaning of the complete phrase. So that is what is etymological definition. Then is by synonym. So rather than using the exact same word again and again, you use synonyms for it, or the words which are similar in meaning. The next is operational definition. Operational definitions are usually considered under science. So when I say it's usually conditional. So if I say something is X, then it can happen if and only if. So if I say apple falls due to gravity on earth, if and only if, what I am trying to understand here is the presence of gravitational force. So what would happen on moon would be something different, or what would happen in something in space would be something different. So there is a conditional parameter here. So under operational definitions we usually talk about conditions. So that can happen only and only if this is true. And finally is the genus versus differentia. So genus is a broad group and differentia is a part of that group. So what I am trying to do here is, I am saying coffee table is a type of table. So under table I am trying to explain all the tables. However, under coffee table I am specifically trying to explain that the type of coffee tables, they are smaller, they are meant only for the purpose, only for some specific purpose, and so on and so forth. So you have a genus which is a broad category, and finally you have the differentia which indicates the differentiating characteristics. So that is how we understand the various types of intentional definition. Now if I understand the intentional definition in simple terms, I can say what is horsepower. I can say horsepower, in previous days it was considered as a power by one horse, but that couldn't be a good scientific definition. So a power of each individual horse can vary, a power of baby horse and an adult horse can vary, and so on and so forth. So hence there was a need for a standardization of the definition. So what came up was, a power needed to raise say 550 pounds by 1 foot in 1 second, and that would be around 750 watts. So that is what is horsepower. So when you are trying to define explicitly a term, you say that is a complete or a proper definition. So under intentional definition we would be talking about 5 types of definition that we would substitute here. So first will be lexical or reportive definition. Lexical means I am straightforwardly listing the meaning of the term. So I can say it is I am trying to make the things more precise, I am trying to bring it in a form of sentence, and it is a kind of something that is a mixture of reportive and stipulative, we will see later. So for example, if I want to define prime number, I can say prime number is a number which is divisible by itself and 1. So that is what is prime number. But under lexical definition, I cannot define the color red. So there was a need to interpret and to understand the various different type of definitions. So this definition which could define color red would not be a part of the lexical definition. So under lexical definition, what I can do is I can precisely define what actually happens, or I can explain the meaning of the term. The next is stipulative definition. The stipulative definition means I am trying to create a new meaning to something from a existing definition. For example, cat for us means common aptitude test, which is an MBA entrance exam. But consider that in this office I have created a new rule where I say cat means come at time. So what would be a benefit of this? It would require lesser time. It would be a single word to remember. It might give secrecy within the office, and it would provide economy of expression. Now these are all the benefits of stipulative definition, and this is something which has been newly introduced within a fixed ambit, and you are not trying to use the existing framework of definition that is there. So stipulative definition helps you understand or bring out something new. Now if I say stipulative definition, I can say it has no meaning for a definition if it is given, if I talk in terms of defendum and definin, when I explain the term bachelor, which means unmarried male. Okay. Now this does not hold true in case of stipulative definition, because what I am trying to do is I am trying to give a new meaning to this word. However, under lexical definition, this holds very true. But let's take an example of lexical definition where I am trying to explain unicorn. A unicorn I can explain as an animal which is similar to horn, which has a single horn on the forehead, and it is similar to horse. So it's a kind of animal which is similar to horse with a single horn at a forehead, and that is known as unicorn. But what happens is unicorn does not exist in reality, and when this thing does not exist in reality, I can say lexical definition is true to the actual usage, but it failed to be true to itself. So when you are actually using it, I can say this definition holds true. But when you are saying that something does not exist, then how can you say that would be true? So that is how we define or we explain the range of different types of definitions, or we provide meaning to different type of definitions. The next is precising definition. Precising definition means I am trying to remove any ambiguity or vagueness. When I say ambiguity means I am trying to remove anything which I am uncertain about. So ambiguity means uncertainty. So I am trying to remove anything which I am uncertain about, and vagueness means I am removing any type of unclear things that are there. So I am trying to provide more clarity to the concept. So I am trying to provide more clarity to the concept when I am trying to eliminate vagueness. So eliminating ambiguity and vagueness is a major idea behind precising definition. So I can give a statement like this: senior citizens will get discount on railway booking. Now what is ambiguous here or what is vague here? I am not defining the age of the citizen. At what age I would consider them to be a senior citizen is one thing that is not defined. The second thing that is not defined is the amount of discount that is being applied. So this would be a kind of vague definition. What could be a kind of precise definition for this? All the senior citizens above age of 65 years will get 10% discount on railway booking. So this would be a kind of precise definition when I am precisely marking and I am removing all kind of ambiguity and vagueness that is present. So if I say Similarly, I can say minorities get a certain benefit. So in this, what I am trying to explain is benefits of the minority. But what kind of minority? Minority could be based on religion. It can be minority for Jains, minority for Muslims or Buddhists. Then it can be based on region, minority for Northeasterns, minority for Mewaris, Marwaris, so on and so forth. So unless and until you get or you try to remove the ambiguity and the vagueness of the thing, the definition won't be a precising definition. The next is a theoretical definition. Theoretical definition which helps you in general understanding and practice. So for example, if I say AIDS is a disease caused by HIV and it is due to opportunistic infection. So that is a kind of definition that was considered a theoretical definition till long. However, recently in 1980s I said that the definition of AIDS got revised and we say that AIDS is a disease occurring by HIV, which is an opportunistic infection. However, it is also important that we note that under AIDS you have decrease in your immune system or deterioration of the immune system. So that's a complete definition, I could say. Similarly, we can again incorporate the theoretical definition example as the horsepower that we recently talked about. So rather than saying the power by each horse would be horsepower, I can precisely say the power that is used to move 550 pounds by 1 foot in 1 second would be a horsepower. So that would be an exact theoretical definition. And finally, the last definition is the persuasive definition, where you have some attitude or emotion that is attached to the definition. So for example, I can define rose as rose is merely a flower, but in case of a poet who is defining a rose, there can be literatures and literatures that have been written on rose. So for him, a rose is much more than a flower. So for him, a definition of rose would be much higher or much beyond what is flower is. So that is a kind of persuasive definition. So you can apply persuasive definitions to anything where you have your emotions or your attitudes attached to it. So controversy of science and religion, I could say, when you are trying to define science or religion from different people's perspective, it would be different. So that would be based on the emotion and the attitude of the people. So with this we cover the 5 types of intentional definitions that we discussed towards the last, that is the lexical, stipulative, theoretical, precising, and finally the persuasive. The types of intentional and the extensional definitions and the basic meaning of definition. I believe usually 1 to 2 questions directly or indirectly are asked from this section. So I hope this class would be fruitful for you for your upcoming examination on 10 July. Have a good day ahead.